Do not adjust your set. We're in control and ready for science. It's Sci Friday on SkyWatch TV. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert, and joining me in studio, the SkyWatch TV science editor, my best friend, my wife, Sharon K. Gilbert.
Hi, honey.
Sweetheart. Oh, once again, we slay us.
Honestly, these poor people, they start watching and they have no idea the jokes that we've told before we even start this thing. Derek's
right.
making up medical conditions over here.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, as it seems every week there's something else that comes out that is just paradigm shifting in the world of science.
Oh, yeah.
But of course, implications on how it affects the definition of what is human, and of course that has also theological and spiritual implications.
And we, as believers, we have to look at that, especially as parents and grandparents, because if it doesn't affect us today, I'm telling you, it will affect our kids and our grandkids, especially something that's taking place today in the UK. There are scientists and other experts who are meeting to decide whether or not it will be legal to continue gene editing in embryos. Right now there are 30 embryo lines that they're allowed to work on, but the scientists want access to more than just this set of genes. They want access to other genes. There are genes that are very important in the development of a fetus as it's growing. And the sad truth is that many women experience very early miscarriage, sometimes so early they didn't even know they were pregnant. And when I was studying biology and embryology at IU, one of the things that as a Christian I took away was the miracle that anybody's born, because there are so many millions of steps that have to take place from implantation on that eventually ends in the birth of a healthy child. So many things can go wrong along the way, and in this day and age we find that way too many kids are born with birth defects. We're seeing a rise in autism. We're seeing almost a rise in infertility and in miscarriage. So what's going on? Because of that, I can understand why these scientists want to learn more about the embryology and what genes are most important in moving from that fertilized cell stage to a child that's about to be born. That's why they want to study it. But the problem is when you can edit genes in the embryo stage, it also opens the door to designer babies.
Yeah. You're talking changes in the germline, which
No, not just germline. We're talking about changes in an embryo that's already fertilized and implanted, and they go in and, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you wanted a blue-eyed baby, but it's the boy you wanted. And he's going to be probably 6 feet tall according to our genetic profile, but he is going to have brown eyes. Sorry about that. Well, can you change it so it's blue? Can you, well, yes, we can. For an additional fee, we'd be happy to do that and give you the perfect baby you want.
This raises a lot of ethical questions, of course, but it also raises some really strange questions about, for example, the homosexual movement, and movement's not the right word, maybe homosexual activists have argued for many years that their lifestyle choices are genetic in origin. And of course they have not just homosexuals, but also transgender people are more prone to certain life-threatening behaviors than the rest of the population. If those conditions are in fact genetic and can be corrected in the womb, or can be corrected rather in the embryonic stage at the genetic level, what does that mean? Would that community embrace these technologies?
Well, in the first place,
and I may be ranging really far afield here.
You really are, because in the first place, there's no proof that it's genetic.
Well, that's true.
There
I know
are
that.
a lot of assumptions made.
That's true.
There's no really defendable proof, reproducible proof that shows a definite genetic component to the choice made to be homosexual or transgender or whatever, because we're seeing a real spectrum of life choices now. That's free will as far as I'm concerned. That is your choice.
And that's how God created us all.
Exactly. But here's the thing. If it were truly a genetic, let's say it's a genetic mutation, because if you really believe in evolution as how we got here, Evolution is traditionally taught as a genetic drive, an imperative to reproduce my set of genes to my progeny over your set of genes. Mine need, and there's this competition within.
Survival of the fittest.
Exactly. If that's true, then because two males together doesn't give a natural way to produce a child, then that effectively cuts off your progeny.
In other
you
words,
have no way of carrying your genetic line on. So evolutionarily speaking, that makes no sense.
Exactly right, yes.
But again, it's a free will choice. You get to choose whatever you want to, and when the Lord, you stand in front of the Lord, you get to defend your choices. There's a show that you and I watch. It's the Fargo series.
Yes.
And there's this wonderful, wonderful scene on there that where a mother who is dying of cancer is explaining to a teenage girl who's reading a depressing book where the author, Albert Camus, is saying that because we all die in the end, life is pointless.
Yes.
And she says, well, I don't know, but let him explain that. I bet he doesn't even have a 6-year-old daughter.
Yes, yes.
And he says, well, when he stands before the Lord, let the person explain, well, some Frenchman told me that it was all pointless.
Yeah.
Let him try to defend that in front of God. And I thought, that's it. Ultimately, we all make a choice that we have to defend.
Yeah.
Whether we believe we're going to defend it or not, the truth is you will at one point bow your knee to Jesus Christ, and you're going to have to explain why you made those choices.
Amen.
So make them count. But evolutionarily speaking, it makes no sense.
Correct.
But if someone were to come along and say, I have done the research, it's been reproduced in a dozen labs, we have found over and over again, this gene always leads to a homosexual choice, then there may come a point where some parent will say, I don't want that gene in there, can you fix it? Or, you know what, there are more opportunities in life today if you choose homosexuality. Can you make sure that gene is now changed my son will want to be gay when he gets older?
There are a lot of questions involved here, and certainly, again, getting back to your original point, that the reason for this research is to find out more about the process that leads to the birth of a child, and to try to eliminate those very sad and tragic genetic defects that can really impair a child and affect its quality of life. But at what point on that slope do you stop and say, okay, we will draw a line here and thus far and no farther? We will only try to correct genetic defects before we get to the point, as you said, of creating designer babies.
I know.
Yes,
that will never stop.
Right.
That will never stop, because scientists are by nature curious individuals.
Right.
And if they can do a thing, they will do a thing.
And if we are basing our morality on the ick factor, the point at which it makes us feel queasy, that goalpost will always move.
It will always
because
move forward.
we just look at the changes that have taken place in our society regarding how we consider different lifestyle choices. Over the past 10 years, things have radically changed. Unless we have an unchanging source of morality, in other words, the God who created all of us, Yahweh, the God of the Bible, who established his code of morality and has preserved it for us through 35 centuries, unless we base our decisions about right and wrong on that, then we will always find the goalposts shifting, and every man does what's right in his own eyes, as we keep reading in the book of Judges in the Old Testament. And that leads to some really frightening conclusions, because in his own eyes, Adolf Hitler was a righteous man.
Yes, in his own eyes he was.
Right.
So who do you want making decisions about your children and your children's children?
Well, I don't know, but there's another story that relates to this story from the UK, which is that the disclosure in the United States this past week that here in U.S. research farms, human-animal chimeras are being gestated. Now, officially, they're telling us that they're not allowing them to gestate beyond about 28 days, very early stages of the embryonic development, because they want to see how they can have these animals develop with human organs. I
Yeah.
guess that's ultimately the goal, they say.
That's the stated goal.
And the National Institutes of Health last September said we're not going to finance any of this because of concerns about the cognition of these created chimeras.
Yes.
If the stem cells start developing human brain cells,
Yes.
there could be issues. And that raises all kinds, not just moral questions, but legal questions.
There are so many questions for me with regard to this. One of the claims is that if we could just have a whole breed of pigs that have human hearts, then we would have a human tissue heart to transplant. Well, that's not fair to that pig.
No.
And I'm
no.
not even sure it's fair to the recipient of the transplant. It could be that that's not a 100% human heart, and there may be, even if all you do is look at the kosher aspect of it, I can't imagine that anyone who believes that believes that pork is not allowed in his
Yes.
or her religion, they're going to say no to that, but you may not be told.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, but we're going to get eventually. That's all. I believe that this is all an excuse to get into actual designer species of various kinds. Let's cross the species. God himself put a barrier in between that you don't naturally combine these species together. We want to force them together, and the only way to find out what will work is to experiment.
Exactly. Trial and error.
Yeah, and if you use a medical reason, then you can get a lot of things accomplished. When if you actually went in and said, we're just curious and we just want to see if we can actually get a horse and a man combination.
Create a
we
centaur.
want to create a centaur. We need more centaurs in this world. It's hard to say, but again, scientists, we are
Yeah.
curious individuals, and if we find a technology that allows us to do a thing, we probably will do that thing. And then the next thing that comes along after it.
Yeah. Well, again, just the boundaries of what is possible for science, again, keeps moving further and further in front of us. It's coming at us faster than we can develop ethics and morals and answer questions that these new technologies are raising.
It's coming far faster than legislators can imagine. I started reading a book last night that we just got, and it's actually a geopolitical book. It's looking at the possibilities of terror attacks in the next 10 to 20 years and how legislators and people who are in charge of Department of Homeland Security and the various intelligence agencies have in the past allowed things to happen they weren't prepared for, lacked the imagination to plan ahead. The writer of this is actually the House of Representatives, head of the Homeland Security Committee.
Okay.
So this is a gentleman who has experience in this. He deals with this every day. And the very first scenario he writes about, I read and I thought, I'm sorry, but you apparently lack the imagination to put yourself technologically 10 years in advance, because he said it in the year 2026 and we're still texting on phones.
Oh, okay. No.
No. That's going to disappear
Right.
in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
10 years from now, who knows what we'll be doing to communicate with each other. But that's how he had the terrorists connecting. He had drones allowed to fly into a public space. Drone laws are about to change because they have to.
Yeah.
And that's one of the stories I wanted to talk about today. How drones are invading our backyards, and you and I, if a drone would have flown over our backyard when Nicole was back there with her friends
Yeah.
and a pool, not that we had a pool, we had baby pools, but if they were back there in their swimsuits, we'd be out there shooting it down
Yeah.
if we had a gun, if the police refused to respond to it.
Well, and there was a case not long ago, last year in Kentucky, where a farmer who did have a pool in the backyard had a teenage daughter who had some friends over, and they were
Yes.
in the pool wearing their swimsuits, and a drone was spotted flying and hovering overhead. And it was
drone with a camera.
With a camera. Well, the gentleman did what a good father would do, and he took his shotgun out and blasted it out of the sky. 10 minutes later, the owner of the drone drove up and said, "Hey, you owe me." And the father said, essentially, take one more step onto my property, and I'm going to shoot something else today. But while most of us would assume that because their privacy was violated, that the gentleman was correct in doing what he did, but instead he is being prosecuted
Yeah.
for vandalism, essentially.
He's also being sued by the drone owner for $1,200, which
Right.
I assume is the cost of the drone. We're going to see more and more of that, and because the federal government, the FAA, which
Right.
we would all think would be regulating
all over this, but
Yeah.
they're not. yet.
In 2012, they were tasked by the federal government, by the president's office. We need regulations for drone traffic. They still haven't released anything. It's 2016, 4 years later, and we still don't have any kind of laws or regulations in place. What I was surprised by when I did some research on this is, according to the FAA themselves, they regulate all the airspace above our property from the ground up.
So it doesn't belong to us.
Not technically, no.
See, I think we had a discussion back in the lunchroom here at SkyWatchTV about that story from Kentucky a while back, and most everybody there assumed that we owned the air right above our property.
I was always told it's like a mile up or something,
Yeah,
or at least so many hundreds of feet.
Not so.
No, there is case law. A decision was made sometime recently that a farmer complained about some activity. I think it was planes flying over, and the judgment was that, yes, anything that he uses in the space above his ground is his. In other words, if you have a house that's 2 stories high, you get up until the top of the chimney.
Yeah.
If you have a barn, or if you have, say, a windmill on your farm or whatever, as long as you're using that space, you can claim that space. But how many of us use the space where drones are flying?
Not typically, no.
No.
And this relates to another topic, not to get too far afield here, but I just talked with a woman named Opal Singleton, who is the CEO of a group in California called MillionKids.org, because of that's the number of children and young adults every year who are lured into prostitution, sex trafficking, and so forth. But it just, the point that she made that really drove home, because both of us, we're pretty tech savvy, but predators out there are using technology that we're not even familiar with, apps for mobile devices, for example, to groom and lure our children and grandchildren. By the way, if you hear anything,
they're laughing in the background here. We have no control over this place.
Children and grandchildren into shame-based behavior in order to pull them into basically destroying their lives. And these drones, with these camera-mounted drones, which apparently were, for grown-up men, especially like me, that was like the toy for Christmas for men.
Yeah.
And you can find some really hysterical YouTube videos of new dads, dads trying to figure out how to fly their drones and, crashing them through the house and stuff. But they're affordable now for many, many people. They've got high-def cameras mounted to them in many cases. And because the laws haven't caught up to it, it's just one more example of how the privacy that we thought we were entitled to is essentially non-existent anymore.
It's more than just our privacy, it's also our safety, because not only can you mount a camera on those drones, you could also mount things that would spread disease.
Yeah, and that's a whole other topic, getting into the potential use of these for
terrorists. Well, you talked with Kate Iola sometime back when we were in Columbia, Missouri, and you were talking about her novel Deadstock, which is about the spread of hoof and mouth.
Hoof and mouth.
And that's pretty easy, actually, to infect a cattle operation with that. And if you could just put little cylinders of
infected manure.
Excreta. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And just drop that into the cattle operation.
Yes.
They would contract the disease.
Drop it into a feedlot, and if you get into the right area, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, where the prevailing winds are strong and move west to east.
Yes.
And of course deer can spread it as well, and you've got deer traveling between farms and tracking around.
Well, and we found out. Yeah, we found out this last spring in 2015 that the highly pathogenic avian influenza that was going through and taking over the turkey and chicken farms, that had a major economic impact. That actually was a relatively small invasion, let's just put it that way. If there was something that really did take, just like a wildfire across the Midwest, and took out cattle and
hogs
imagine the economic impact, not just on our food supply, but on the individual people themselves.
Sure.
Our nation would be crippled.
Yeah.
And it's relatively easy to do.
One of the reasons that our agribusiness is so important to the economy is that we have been very diligent over the last 100 years in eliminating diseases like hoof and mouth from our food supply, from hogs, from pork, from beef. And so we can export those products around the world. If I remember correctly, the last reported case of hoof and mouth was in the 20s. But if it were to, yes, it would be a major blow to the U.S. economy.
But here's another one. This will actually is chilling. But if you could mount a gas canister underneath, because some of these drones are pretty good size, that's something that you could remotely activate so that it triggered the release of the what was inside the container. You could aerosolize, and trust me, there is aerosolized smallpox in existence, in freezers, in Russia, and I believe they even have it here in the United States. But if a terrorist organization decided that they wanted to release any kind of a biological pathogen into a small area, say school, you're on a school playground filled with kids, and suddenly something sweeps over and they all go, look at that!
Yeah. Well, it's a world that is growing more and more disturbing with each passing year. And it just feels like prophetically things are I mean, maybe prophetically is not the right word, but it just feels like things are converging, or at least heading towards a convergence.
Yeah, well, you talk about it on your updates during the week, the geopolitics of what's taking place. It's like reading the Bible.
Yeah.
It's like reading prophecy and seeing it played out in the headlines in ways that really, it makes the hair stand up on my arms sometimes.
Now, to be fair, and you've done some research on this, when you were researching the Spanish flu outbreak of 1918, 1919, our grandparents, great-grandparents 100 years ago, probably felt very much the same way as they were looking at millions, literally millions of people dying in the trenches of World War I over in France and Germany, and then have that followed with 20 to 50 million dead due to the Spanish flu. They probably felt the same way then.
I'm sure they did. That, however, was one aspect of what we see in prophecy. We're looking at so many things that are coming together. You use the word convergence, and it's the right word, because geopolitically, as far as the technology that's out there, we now have an interconnected world that fulfills. People will increase in knowledge, and we will travel to and fro. We can travel at the speed of fiber optic cable now.
Right. But for the first, and the thing I think is so cool is that for the first time in human history, and I have no doubt that God could make this happen supernaturally, but for the first time in human history, we have the technology that with one video phone and a 4G connection, the entire world can see an event happening in one place in real time.
Exactly.
Like the two witnesses in Jerusalem, or Christ in the clouds, and every tribe and every nation seeing him and wailing.
Amen to that. And by the way, I want to remind our wonderful viewers, by the way, you guys are so awesome. And we get emails from you that just, honestly, we have the best time reading our emails some mornings. But the Pecks, Josh and Christina Peck, are going to be here next week. So pretty soon, Josh Peck will be sitting in on Sci Fridays. And I got to tell you, talk about head exploding moments. He's going to discuss a number of things when he gets into the physics. You know, when I was in college, I studied physics, and my head did explode. It did. I just was sitting there in the third row, and suddenly, boom. And
that freshman year, that was the wall. That was the wall I hit.
Mine too. Mine too.
So I went to econ instead of physics.
I went to biology.
In the month of January, we're offering as our gift to you for your financial gift of any amount, the Miracles Journal. This is going to be an exciting year, perhaps even more exciting than we would have hoped, but this is a way for you to record it in style. There's also a very stylish and very attractive wooden bookmark.
It's beautiful.
Now that's our gift to you for your gift of any amount during the month of January while supplies last. And if you need instructions on how to donate, visit SkyWatchTV.com. Sweetheart, I always enjoy these. This time goes by so quickly.
I love talking to you. We were joking before we even started the recording today with Joe, and saying that we should just have a camera follow us around at home. And it would be 3 days in a row where we're just napping all day long. But the truth is that you and I talk like this all day.
Yes.
And I praise God every day that I get to be married to you, to the person who is my best friend and the most like me in this world, and that the two of us get to share those things back and forth. So every day's
and that
absolutely
after
awesome.
18 years, you're still the most interesting person I know.
And right back at you. I love you, honey.
I love you, sweetheart.
And you're cute to boot.
Well, we thank you for watching. Pray you have a blessed
They're all
weekend.
throwing up now.
Exactly right. For Sharon Gilbert, I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.